The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was alive with shimmering light and strange humming energy, its ceilings so high they disappeared into a glow that looked like the sky itself, and every wall pulsed with alien technology older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Hundreds of delegates filled the rising tiers of seats, their voices sharp whispers as the rumor traveled like fire through dry grass, and those whispers all carried the same words: the humans have arrived. Many in that hall had seen new species before, some trembling in fear when they were dragged in front of the council, others arrogant until their fleets were shattered, and still others broken before they even stepped onto the polished silver floor. Yet today felt different from the very first moment. From the far doors at the end of the long chamber, the humans entered slowly, their boots echoing with steady rhythm, and not one of them showed the smallest hint of fear. Their eyes moved across the alien council like explorers studying a map, and their faces carried a calm that unsettled even the oldest rulers who had seen 1,000 wars. A tall alien minister hissed under his breath that the humans should be on their knees, that this was the greatest empire in the galaxy, but the humans did not kneel, they only bowed slightly, respectful but not submissive, and then stood in silence as though time itself belonged to them. The crowd of alien leaders had expected begging, they had expected shouts or threats, they had expected panic, but the calm silence pressed down heavier than any cry for mercy could have done. At first, some tried to laugh, but even their laughter sounded nervous, because the humans gave no reaction, and that silence made the massive hall feel smaller and colder. From the galleries high above, alien soldiers shifted uncomfortably, their weapons gleaming, but the humans did not look up, did not flinch, as if the sight of thousands of warships outside and armed guards inside was nothing more than background noise to them. A murmur rippled through the council, each delegate leaning toward another, wondering if this strange calmness was arrogance or ignorance, yet a quiet fear began to creep into their thoughts. In the center of the hall, on a raised platform, the council leader tried to speak loudly, tried to remind everyone of the Empire's power, but his words echoed against the silence of the humans, and every alien ear began to notice that it was not the humans who seemed small, but the Empire that suddenly felt the need to prove itself. The silence was not weakness, it was weight, it was something that pressed against the chest, and it made every boast sound hollow. The humans stood tall, their faces unreadable, and some of the older species began to remember ancient stories of predators who hunted not with sound but with patience, who waited calmly until the right moment. For the first time in years, the council members felt a chill that their advanced fleets could not explain. A heavy pause fell over the hall as one of the alien generals, his skin scaled like black stone and his eyes sharp with endless battles, leaned forward from his seat. He studied the humans carefully, watching their stillness, watching the way they breathed in unison like soldiers trained in storms, and his voice cut through the whispers with a sharpness that made even the guards stand straighter. "This calmness," he muttered low but clear enough for many to hear, "it feels more dangerous than war." The words hung in the air like a shadow over fire, and for the first time, the mighty empire began to wonder not how quickly these humans could be conquered, but whether they had just welcomed into their hall a power that did not need to shout, did not need to rage, because it had already survived storms the Empire could not imagine. The Alien Council was restless after the first meeting, the silence of the humans still echoing in their minds like a quiet drumbeat that would not stop, and so the Empire decided that calm must be broken, that these strange newcomers must be reminded of the scale of power that surrounded them. On the second day, the humans were summoned again, led into a vast chamber whose walls were alive with glowing screens showing fleets of starships orbiting distant suns, cannons large enough to split moons, and shimmering shields that could cover entire planets. The council leader spoke proudly, his voice booming through hidden amplifiers as he described the ships, the weapons, the thousands of worlds under the Empire's control, and his words were meant to impress, meant to strike awe into hearts that should have trembled. Delegates cheered, raising their clawed hands, their scaled arms, their metallic appendages in praise of the Empire's greatness, and the floor shook with the echo of pride. Yet the humans did not tremble, they did not flinch, and they did not bow. Their eyes followed each weapon on the screens with steady interest, as though they were studying a school lesson, and when the council leader finished his grand display, the humans only nodded politely, their expressions calm and unreadable. This simple nod was more unsettling than any speech could have been, because it carried no fear and no surprise, only quiet understanding. A whisper moved quickly through the hall, sharp and fearful. What had these humans seen that made such weapons seem ordinary? One of the alien ministers demanded to know why they showed no reaction, his voice rising in frustration, but the human at the front simply leaned closer to his companion and whispered softly, words that were not meant to be heard yet somehow reached the ears of nearby translators, "We've seen worse." The 3 words spread like wildfire across the hall, repeated from alien to alien, and the silence that followed was heavy. Worse. Worse than fleets that could destroy a world. Worse than weapons that had conquered 100 civilizations. The thought was impossible, yet the humans stood there with that same calmness, and their quiet made the mighty empire suddenly doubt its own glory. To erase this doubt, the council announced they would conduct a test, a public trial to measure these humans against something that no other species had ever faced without terror. Across the empire, messages were sent, summoning crowds to watch the spectacle, for nothing stirred loyalty like seeing another species humbled. The plan was simple: intimidate the humans, break their calmness, show them that in this galaxy strength belonged only to the empire. In the days that followed, the alien worlds buzzed with expectation, every broadcast repeating the same message: the humans would learn fear, and the empire would once again prove that no outsider could resist its might. Yet in the quiet chambers where the humans rested, there was no sign of fear. They spoke in low voices, discussing not escape or surrender but observations, the design of weapons, the structure of ships, the patterns of alien guards, as if they were cataloguing everything with cold patience. When the day of the trial arrived, the arena was filled with roaring crowds, voices from 100 species shouting for the humans to be humbled, banners of the empire waving like flames. The ground shook with the force of their chants, but still the humans walked out with that same steady rhythm, their boots striking the stone floor without hesitation. The council sat above, their eyes gleaming with anticipation, certain that at last the calmness would crack. The gates of the arena opened, and from the shadows came the monster chosen for the test, a beast bred in laboratories, massive claws scraping the ground, its breath steaming with toxic vapor, a creature that had killed every prisoner thrown before it. The crowd roared louder, expecting screams, expecting retreat, expecting the humans to finally break. But the human at the front only removed his coat slowly, folded it neatly, and stepped forward with the same calm he had shown in the council chamber. His eyes followed the monster, not with fear but with study, like a hunter watching the rhythm of prey, and his stillness spread an uneasy quiet through the stands. The beast charged, its roar shaking the air, and the human did not run, did not even blink. At the last second, he moved, not with panic but with precise control, stepping aside so smoothly that the monster's massive claw struck only air. Gasps rose from the crowd, and the alien leaders leaned forward, their pride beginning to twist into doubt. The human turned back, eyes calm, as if the entire arena were nothing more than a practice ground. The beast roared again and lunged, but once more the human's calm movements turned the attack into nothing, and the silence in the stands grew heavier than the noise of weapons ever had. For the first time, the empire saw not defiance, not fear, not arrogance, but something far more dangerous, a calmness that could not be broken, a calmness that felt like the quiet before a storm too large to control. The arena shook with the cries of thousands as the monster circled, its armored hide glistening with slime, its jaws wide enough to crush steel, yet the human stood calm in the center, no weapon in his hands, only that steady gaze that unsettled even the most hardened warriors in the stands, and with every passing second the mood shifted from excitement to unease because the human was not playing the role expected of prey, he was moving like a predator who knew the rhythm of the fight before it began. The beast lunged again, claws slashing through the dust and stone, and the human dodged so smoothly that it looked less like a reaction and more like he had seen the strike before it happened, his body sliding to the side, his boots finding balance with perfect control, and when the crowd screamed in shock, he only tilted his head as if studying a puzzle. The alien generals exchanged worried looks, some whispering that perhaps the humans had hidden strength, but others hissed that this was only luck, that the beast would crush him in time. Yet luck did not explain the stillness of his breathing, the calm in his eyes, the way he waited for each attack with patience instead of fear. The monster roared so loud that the walls trembled, its tail sweeping across the ground like a giant whip, and still the human bent low and let the strike pass above him, his hand brushing the dust from his coat as if this entire spectacle was beneath him. The crowd that once roared for blood was now growing quiet, confusion spreading as they watched this strange calmness stretch into something terrifying, and whispers rose again. How could such a fragile being from an unknown world resist the Empire's greatest beast? Then, without warning, the human moved, not to dodge but to act, his hand gripping a loose shard of stone from the arena floor, and with a motion so fast the eyes of many aliens barely followed, he hurled it into the beast's face, not to kill but to blind one of its glowing eyes. The monster shrieked, stumbling back, and the crowd gasped, because this was not defense, this was control, the human dictating the rhythm of battle with nothing more than calm timing and a shard of broken rock. From the council's high seats, one alien minister shouted that the beast should be unleashed fully, and so a command was given, releasing the chains of pain stimulators embedded in the creature's flesh, forcing it into a frenzy beyond reason. The beast's roars became maddened, its movements wild and violent, dust rising in great clouds as it smashed at the floor, but the human did not panic even then. He waited, he watched, and when the beast lunged in blind rage, he rolled to the side and sprang onto its back with sudden speed. Gasps erupted across the arena as the human clung to the thick hide, climbing higher while the creature twisted and bucked, and from above the council chamber the alien generals gripped the arms of their seats in disbelief. The man was small compared to the beast, fragile compared to claws that could tear ships apart, yet in his calm there was something more powerful than size or strength. With a sharp strike of his fist, he drove another shard of stone into the creature's neck, not deep enough to kill but enough to steer its pain, and slowly, impossibly, he turned its rage into motion, guiding the beast in a circle as though taming it before the eyes of the Empire. The crowd, once ready to laugh at human weakness, now sat in stunned silence, some unable to believe what they were witnessing. Finally, after long minutes of chaos, the human leapt down from the beast's back, landing with quiet grace, his chest rising in calm breath, and the creature, confused and exhausted, collapsed in the dust with a final groan. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. No one cheered, no one mocked, for what they had seen was not chance and not desperation but a calmness that had mastered even the Empire's strongest terror. In the council chamber above, alien leaders stared at each other with unease, their plans to humiliate these humans now twisted into doubt, and one of the oldest generals, his voice trembling though he had faced 100 wars, whispered the words none wanted to hear, that this calmness was not weakness at all. It was the quiet strength of survivors who had faced worse than war, and it was more terrifying than any army the galaxy had ever known. The arena incident spread across the Empire faster than light, carried in whispers through marketplaces, broadcast across military stations, and replayed in the secret chambers of alien leaders who could not explain how one fragile human had survived what should have been instant death, and soon the calmness of these strange newcomers became the subject of both fascination and fear. In hidden vaults deep beneath the council chambers, alien scholars and intelligence officers gathered around glowing tables, their long fingers tapping at data screens as they pulled every scrap of knowledge available about the planet called Earth. Files appeared in layers of holographic text, showing images of ancient ruins, maps of shifting borders, and records of endless wars that scarred the surface of that blue-green world, and as the information grew, the silence of the room deepened. They read of great plagues that swept across continents, killing millions, yet humanity had rebuilt. They read of empires that rose and fell, crushing their people with iron rule, yet the survivors kept rising again. They read of storms, famines, earthquakes, volcanoes, and still the humans endured. The scholars' eyes widened as they uncovered stories of weapons that turned cities into ash in moments, weapons unleashed by humans not against aliens but against themselves, and yet those same humans had rebuilt cities over the ruins, carrying on as though destruction were only another season to survive. One alien researcher trembled as he whispered that no species in the Empire had ever endured such cycles of pain and rebirth, because most civilizations that faced such trials simply vanished into history, but humanity had not vanished, humanity had learned. They uncovered the records of exploration, of wooden ships crossing vast oceans filled with storms, of fragile machines breaking through the skies into space, of men and women walking on the surface of their own moon, and they realized these people had always sought the edge of the unknown with fearless steps. Some aliens refused to believe, shaking their heads and claiming the stories must be exaggerated, but the data was clear, the images undeniable. Humanity had not been forged in peace or in the comfort of empire, they had been shaped in fire, trial after trial, until calmness was not a mask but the natural state of a people who had already faced the worst that existence could throw at them. In another chamber, a group of military strategists reviewed human battle history, watching footage of soldiers holding broken lines against overwhelming odds, hearing recordings of leaders who spoke calmly even as cities burned around them, and the generals felt something they had not felt in centuries: unease. They saw that humans did not always win, but even in defeat they adapted, they returned stronger, and sometimes their calmest moments came not when they were victorious but when they were outnumbered, staring into impossible battles with steady eyes. One elder general whispered that this was why the man in the arena had not feared the beast, because to him it was only another test, another storm to survive, and storms were nothing new to his people. In the great council hall, debate raged as leaders demanded to know if these humans were a threat, if they were to be crushed quickly before they spread, but the scholars warned that underestimating them would be the Empire's greatest mistake. A recording from Earth was played in secret, a simple video of a human voice saying, "We do not fear hardship, for hardship made us who we are," and the words, though spoken long ago, struck the aliens with the weight of prophecy. Around the galaxy, whispers began to grow among the ordinary citizens who had heard rumors of the humans' calmness and survival. Some saw them as dangerous invaders in disguise, but others began to admire them, to wonder if perhaps the galaxy could learn something from a species that had endured so much and still walked forward without trembling. Meanwhile, in their quarters, the human envoys remained as calm as ever, sharing quiet meals, speaking softly, never boasting of the arena, never showing pride in front of alien eyes, and that calm only deepened the mystery. To the Empire's rulers, the silence of the humans had transformed into something far more frightening than any weapon, because silence meant patience, silence meant strength hidden beneath the surface, silence meant they were dealing not with victims but with survivors who had never needed mercy from anyone. The more the Empire uncovered about Earth, the more a shadow grew in their hearts, and the council chambers filled not with the pride of conquerors but with the questions of frightened leaders who began to understand that humanity's calmness was not ignorance or arrogance but the quiet weight of a species that had already faced worse than war. The council, unsettled by the revelations of Earth's history and the whispers spreading across the Empire, decided to test the humans again, but this time not with monsters or weapons, instead with words, mocking laughter, and the pressure of humiliation. For many leaders believed that even if humans could survive storms and wars, their calmness would shatter under the weight of scorn in front of thousands. A grand feast was arranged in the highest chamber of the Empire, a hall glittering with crystal lights, endless tables filled with exotic foods from across 1,000 worlds, and every noble and general who mattered sat waiting to witness the moment when humanity would finally break. The humans were led inside with careful ceremony, their plain uniforms and simple posture standing out against the shimmering robes and jeweled crowns of the Empire's most powerful, and already the mocking smiles began to spread. Alien nobles lifted their cups and laughed loudly, asking if humans even understood the taste of such rare food. Others whispered that creatures who lived in endless war could never appreciate peace, and still others made cruel jokes about their small numbers and fragile bodies. The sound of laughter echoed through the chamber like sharp blades, but the humans did not flinch. They did not answer, they simply sat at the table quietly, their eyes moving slowly across the room as though taking measure of every corner, every exit, every guard. This silence only encouraged the nobles, who laughed louder, their voices filling the air with arrogance, until one minister slammed his cup on the table and demanded, "Why do you not speak, humans? Are you afraid to face the truth of your weakness?" For a long moment the hall was quiet except for the crackle of flames in the tall torches, and then the human leader, who had said almost nothing since arrival, lifted his head and smiled calmly. His voice was not raised, yet it carried clearly to every ear in the chamber, and his words froze the laughter at once. "We don't start wars," he said softly, "but we finish them." The silence that followed was heavier than any roar, heavier even than the crowd's cries in the arena, because the calmness in his tone was not a threat, not a boast, but a simple truth spoken with the weight of history behind it. Many of the nobles shifted uneasily in their seats, the smugness vanishing from their faces, and even the generals who had fought 100 battles felt their stomachs tighten at the quiet confidence in that single sentence. Around the hall, whispers began again, faint at first but growing like a tide, words repeated, carried from ear to ear, spreading beyond the chamber into the city outside. They do not start wars, but they finish them. The Empire had ruled through fear for centuries, its threats keeping countless worlds silent, but now the threat had been turned against them not by shouting, not by fire, but by calmness, by a warning spoken as though it were a law of nature. Some nobles tried to laugh again, forcing weak smiles, but their eyes betrayed their fear, and others remained frozen, replaying the words again and again in their minds. One general, a veteran who had commanded fleets that crushed entire star systems, whispered under his breath that these humans were more dangerous than any enemy they had faced, not because of their weapons but because of the patience in their eyes, because they carried with them a history that had already taught them how to survive against impossible odds. The feast continued in uneasy silence, food untouched, music failing to lift the weight from the air, and the humans remained calm, eating little, speaking less, their presence like a quiet storm building just beyond the horizon. That night, across the empire, the story spread like fire, told in markets, in barracks, in hidden chambers. The humans had spoken only one line, but it was enough to shake the foundation of the empire itself. And in the hearts of those who heard it, respect and fear began to grow side by side, for the galaxy now understood that calmness was not weakness, it was the warning of a species that had survived everything and was prepared to finish anything that dared to threaten it. The words spoken at the feast echoed across the empire like a shadow that could not be shaken, and in the days that followed the council chambers were filled with unrest, generals arguing that humans must be struck down quickly before their calmness spread like fire among the other races, while ministers warned that open war might awaken something far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Behind closed doors, plans were drawn in secret, fleets quietly ordered to prepare for movement, and soldiers whispered among themselves that perhaps the empire would crush humanity before it had a chance to grow roots in the galaxy. Yet as the empire plotted, a different story began to surface from the far edges of its worlds, carried by traders and travelers who returned with strange reports. On one poor colony where the empire had long neglected its people, humans were seen walking through broken streets, giving food to starving children and medicine to the sick, sharing without demand, asking for nothing in return. On another mining world, where workers lived under the lash of overseers, humans stepped into the dust and lifted stones with their bare hands, working alongside the oppressed without complaint, their calmness not as defiance this time but as quiet kindness. Alien villagers who had long been forgotten by their rulers spoke of humans who listened to their stories, who sat by their fires and shared their water, and the whispers spread faster than the empire could silence them. The generals who prepared for war grew uneasy as they heard these rumors, for they understood that fear alone could not control a people once hope had been planted, and hope was now spreading wherever humans walked. In secret councils, some argued that humans were manipulating the colonies for power, but others shook their heads, pointing to the truth that no cameras had been present, no speeches given, only small acts of compassion that no one could fake. The empire, which had long believed power was measured only by fleets and fire, now faced something it could not understand: power built on calm kindness, the ability to win hearts without threats. In one quiet chamber, a council minister whispered that this was more dangerous than any weapon, for weapons could be broken, but loyalty born of gratitude could not. As the debate raged, spies reported back that the humans never bragged of their deeds, never demanded recognition, they simply helped and moved on, leaving behind silence and whispers of hope. The emperor himself, seated on his towering throne of light, listened to the arguments of his council with a face carved of stone, but in his heart unease began to grow, for he could not deny the fear in his general's eyes or the shift in his people's voices. The plan to strike first no longer felt like certainty but like desperation, and the weight of the humans' calm presence hung over every decision like a storm cloud that refused to move. Across the galaxy, the question began to spread from colony to colony, from soldier to citizen: were these humans enemies to fear or allies to trust? And though no answer came, one truth became clear to all who had seen them: if war came, it would not be the humans who began it, but if war came, it would be the humans who ended it. The turning point had arrived, though no one yet dared to speak its name aloud, and in the silence of their calm actions, humanity had already begun to change the empire without firing a single shot.